Hey guys, Coach Shane Miller here, Gameday Baseball. I'm the speed, strength, and conditioning coach here. Want to talk to you about what to do with a sore elbow, sore shoulder, sprained ankle. So I'm talking about really what we call an acute injury. So an acute injury is something that just happens and immediately you feel pain. It could be, like in the case of a sore elbow or a sore shoulder, something that happens like relatively quickly, but maybe over the course of a few games or over the course of a weekend tournament. But back in the day, we used to do a rehab or recovery type principle called RICE, and some of you might be familiar with that. It was rest, ice, compression, and elevation. So the big part I want to talk to you about is the ice component, because the rest factor is still good. Um, and actually, I guess the compression is not as much as well, or not as needed now either. But let's talk about ice. So a lot of times, elbow hurts, we put ice on it. Sprain the ankle, you put ice on it. So the research is not, conclusive, absolutely conclusive that we should not be using ice. But here's the argument about ice: is we injure a body part and it becomes inflamed, it swells up. So what we're seeing now is that the swelling, um, it becomes stiff. You know what swelling looks like, kind of, sometimes like in the case of an ankle, it's like it just swells up large. Well, that swelling actually becomes a cast. So it really seeks to protect the injured area in order to not move and create further damage. So we actually want swelling in a joint that has just most recently immediately been injured. So in the case of like a sprained ankle. So then the inflammation, what some scientists and some research is showing us is that the inflammation in a joint is actually sending signals to the brain to come back to that joint to send healing, to send all the nutrients, micronutrients, and red blood cells and oxygen to that area to actually heal it faster. So when we put ice on a joint, what we're doing is we're getting rid of inflammation, which used to be thought as a good thing. Now we know that it's not. You put ice on a joint, it restricts blood flow. We absolutely know for sure that that is detrimental to the injury. We want to increase blood flow to that area to speed up healing. And then the only case that might be useful in ice or even cold therapy would be to alternate it with heat. So we know that when we put ice or cold on a body part or in a joint, it will restrict blood flow. Then when we couple that with heat, then it expands. So the ice restricts, the heat expands. So in the case of an injury, a sore elbow, you're coming off the weekend and the elbow's sore Monday, Tuesday. So the right kind of rehab protocol would be 5 minutes of ice, 5 minutes of heat, 5 minutes of ice, 5 minutes of heat. To be able to prepare for play. So if your elbow is sore and you're going to practice, you want to add heat because we want the blood vessels to expand. We want to increase blood flow to that area, and that's going to speed up healing. So bottom line, it's not absolutely conclusive. I don't feel comfortable in saying absolutely not ever, but I do have good understanding to think that we do not need to use ice as part of our recovery protocol. Use heat and use alternating heat and ice.